One of the things that Dr. Weber talked about was interdisciplinary thinking. Well, I'm mostly a math person, but then I'm kind of interdisciplinary. And one of the things I am is definitely nonlinear, even though I'm analytical. And so when they said we're going to do something on polymath, and they said, you know, like Renaissance man, I immediately thought, ooh, contemporary women, huh? So that's where we're going to go, is with contemporary women. So as you can see, my title is Wonder If an Actress Has Ever Blossomed into a Mathematician or Scientist. Well, I'm sure that some of these people are going to be familiar to you. So there is Mayim Bialik, who is, of course, from Blossom, and then most recently from The Big Bang Theory. There's Danica McKellar, who is Winnie Cooper in The Wonder Years. So I assume that you've made the connection of blossomed into a mathematician or wondered about. Okay, also, how about Natalie Portman of Star Wars, Thor, and the Black Swan? Or, I'm pretty sure none of you were around at this time, but in the 1930s and 40s, there was actress Hedy Lamarr, who was once dubbed the most beautiful woman in the world. Okay, should they be considered polymaths? I'm hoping that Dr. Garneau, you will admit that maybe there are some more current polymaths. So let's look at some of the backgrounds of these women. There's Mayim Bialik. Her heritage, she was the daughter of a first-generation American teacher and a filmmaker. Her grandparents were European refugees from the Holocaust. She started acting at age 12, and she was cast as Blossom at 15. She did go on to college, however, she thought that education was important, and so even though she was doing Blossom, she was accepted into Harvard, but they gave her a deferred placement. And while she was still working on Blossom, waiting for it to finish so she could go on to Harvard, she was accepted by Yale. And so she decided to go to UCLA. Okay, in 2007, she earned a PhD in neuroscience, specializing in psychoneuroendocrinology. And I'm not going to read that thesis. I did it before, but as Jeanette will admit, the pollen is pretty thick right now. So I'll let you read her thesis. And it was probably half of her thesis was just the title. Okay. All right, but she had some other talents as well. Besides acting, she was an accomplished dancer. She played the piano, the trumpet, the bass guitar, and the harp. Oops. Okay. She was also is spokesman for the Holistic Moms Network. She writes weekly for the Kevlar.com, which is a parenting site, and it's actually a rather hip, sometimes comical, irreverent parenting site that includes a newish Jewish twist on parenting issues, but it's not exclusively for Jewish mothers. She's also an author of a book, Beyond the Sling, a real-life guide to raising confident, loving children, the attachment parenting way. Okay, then there's Natalie Portman, who was actually born Natalie Hirschlag. She was discovered, yes, here we go. Okay, she was discovered when she was 11 in a pizza parlor. Actually, there's some discussion about that. They said that somebody approached her at the age of 9, and she said she didn't want to model, she wanted to be an actress. So at age 11, they approached her again, somebody else did, and at a pizza parlor, and she decided, okay, I can start there. So at age 12, she did her film debut in The Professional, which was actually about a hitman. You can imagine what it was like for her parents to say, oh, sure, you can have our 12-year-old act as an assistant hitman. Okay. Hello. Okay. Independent study in sophomore. So we have independent study here. Well, they had independent study in her high school. And she did a simple method to demonstrate the enzymatic production of hydrogen from sugar, illustrating environmentally friendly biotechnology for the utilization of renewable energy sources. And that earned her a semifinalist position that year in the prestigious Intel Science Talent Search. And this is as a sophomore in high school. In a recent New York Times Magazine article, Why Are There Still So Few Women in Science, the author wrote, Danica McKellar, who starred as Winnie Cooper on The Wonder Years before earning her bachelor's degree in math at UCLA, along with her follow-up books, Kiss My Math, Hot X Algebra Exposed, and Girls Get Curves, geometry takes shape, may well have done more to encourage girls to stick with math than any other governmental task force. I think that's quite the compliment. And then to our final woman, Hedy Lamarr. Okay, she was born in Vienna in 1919. She was christened Hedwig Eva Marie Geisler. She was the daughter of an affluent Jewish banker. She attended exclusive girls' school in Switzerland. She studied ballet and classical piano. She spoke at least 5 languages. And then at the age of 19, she married Fritz Mandel. Now, it's going to be significant that I wrote down there that he was an immensely wealthy Austrian munitions manufacturer. However, he wasn't a great husband. In fact, he was in favor of and supported the Nazis, and she was Jewish. This didn't go over well. Okay, so she hated the Nazis and her husband's business, and pretty much she hated her husband, actually. So in 1937, she escaped. Okay, she disguised herself, she escaped from the marriage and also from Austria, and she came to America. We won't explain how she got here, that's a story in and of itself. But anyway, she did come to America, and she signed up with MGM. Now, her first foray into film as a teenager in Austria was pretty risque. I mean, even by today's terms, it was really risque. So she changed her name. She tried to reinvent herself when she signed with MGM. So then she became Hedy Lamarr. She was a glamorous, successful actress. She starred with such actors as Clark Gable, Jimmy Stewart, Spencer Tracy, Judy Garland, and Bob Hope. However, she was really interested in the war. Remember, she's Jewish. She's not real happy with what the Nazis are doing. And particularly, she was very upset as she heard more and more that the Germans were attacking passenger cruisers that were filled with refugees. And she decided that something needed to be done. Surely you should think something should be done, right? Okay, she remembered sitting around her husband's dinner table because he had interesting people at his table. Okay, he had Hitler, Mussolini, German Nazi generals, and she was just the pretty little thing that was sitting at the table. Okay, so she was supposed to be not the dumb blonde, but the dumb brunette. Okay, that was beautiful. That's why she was there, is because she was beautiful. What they didn't realize is that she had a wonderful mind, and she was listening to absolutely everything that they said. She took it in, not knowing what she was going to do with it, but she did indeed take it in. So now she's in America, she sees what's going on, and she wants to do something. And she's thinking about the ships, and she's thinking torpedoes. They're torpedoing these ships. Something needs to be done to stop the torpedoes. Okay, so Richard Rhodes, who's best known for his Pulitzer Prize-winning work on the atomic bomb, also wrote a book on Hedy Lamarr. Makes sense, right? Atomic bomb, Hedy Lamarr. Okay. And it was called Hedy's Folly, The Life and Breakthrough Inventions of Hedy Lamarr, the Most Beautiful Woman in the World. And this is how he described her. The glamorous movie star by day was by night the lonely immigrant channeling an inner Thomas Edison. She set aside one room in her home, had a drafting table installed with the proper lighting and the proper tools, had a whole wall in the room of engineering reference books. I'm sure that's how everybody pictured Hedy Lamarr. In 1940, she met George Hantel. Now, he was perhaps the most mechanically inclined of all composers. He too was a polymath, but we're dealing with the women, so we're going to leave him out. Okay. However, they did work together. They spent countless hours together drafting and redrafting designs. The frequency hopping technology that they came up with was to keep the constantly signal from the torpedoes roving and hopping from one frequency to another, so it was impossible to lock onto a target. And so that was their torpedo system. They also came up with the proximity fuse, which is an anti-aircraft shell, which is an early version of today's smart bombs. Not bad for 1940 and an actress. Okay, finally, in August 1942, the United States gave them a patent. However, and they were willing to give the US Navy this patent, all claim on it, because they wanted to be able to end the war. But the men in government didn't think that anybody that beautiful could have a brain in her head. So they said no. They said, but you really can help us. So what they suggested she do to help them is go raise money for the war. So she went out and she sold war bonds and she brought in millions of dollars doing that. But she was frustrated. She had this wonderful thing to actually stop the submarines, stop the war, and they wouldn't use it. So years go by, the war ends, they still haven't used her technology. And by 1962, all the ships now in the Cuban blockade were utilizing her invention. Now, mind you, how long ago is this? Her patent has died. Okay, so she has no claim to the patent and any monies, royalties off of it. But at least it's in use, so she's happy about that. Okay, if we look at what else comes from her design, we see that the pagers, today's cell phones, the GPS systems, communication on the internet, the government's Milstar system, which controls all the intercontinental missiles in U.S. and in the U.S. weapons arsenal, are all related to her technology and that of George. Okay, so we already said that her patent had expired. She had no royalty, so she didn't get a penny from her groundbreaking invention. However, in 1990s, she was awarded some stock in Winlam, which is kind of like a brain bank, if you will. They felt sorry for her that she'd been shortchanged, so they gave her some stock. And finally, in 1997, she was awarded the Pioneer Award by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and she became the first female to receive the Bowlby Glass Spirit of Achievement Award, considered the Oscars of inventing. And what I liked is that on one of those, when she was finally given, I think it was her very first award, she said, well, it's about time. Which I think we can all say amen to that. It's about time. So, are these women polymaths? Well, all these women unquestionably had expertise in a significant number of different subject areas. They were highly intelligent, talented, avid problem solvers, and I think all of those have to do with what Dr. Weber and Dr. Garneau were talking about earlier. So I'm thinking that maybe it's not just Renaissance man that we can think of as polymaths, but we can think of contemporaries as well. And I think that if we think, are they polymaths? I would vote yes. Thank you.